only took me halfway through the class to get one made. You know what's sad about that is I already have these. I made this up like before the class ever started, but keeping it myself. I'm gonna sell it. Does everybody have one? I just gave out with Tina's help this morning just chapters 4 and 5, but I plan on having the rest of these made up so you'll have all the chapters and give them out Wednesday night. So next Sunday you'll maybe be a little prepared, and I don't know, maybe not. I know that I certainly wasn't this morning. I forgot to send my class slides in this morning. I forgot to send my sermon slide in this morning. Who knows? That's what it was. Man, listen, I'm telling you, y'all missed out on the men's breakfast yesterday morning, ladies, because I made candied bacon. And it was all gone. It was all gone. Man, it was great. It was a good time altogether. I was so glad that we got to do that yesterday with the men. We had such a good discussion. And I'll tell you what, seeing the young men there involved, Preston made pigs in a blanket. He made them. I was kind of impressed. But it was good. Glad we got to do that. We're going to be studying in Ezra, continuing, hence the study guide. We're going to go back to chapter 4 just a little bit. We got into chapter 4 last week. We finished up chapter 3, got into chapter 4. We know that chapter 4, we're seeing the effects that when we work for God, whenever we put forth effort to do the things that God has us do, we always see the effects come back of interruption and the discouragement that comes from trying to shut those efforts down. And so in Ezra chapter 4, we had gotten a little bit into the chapter, just to review a little bit, the opposition and discouragement that comes from the rebuilding. That's really what these first chapters are all about, is about the rebuilding of what's been destroyed. And the first question I asked last week when we got into chapter 4 was, why do you think opposition arises most when God's people are trying to do something good? Why do you think that is? What is it about whenever someone is doing the right thing, others want to tear it down? We see it all the time. What is it about that? What do you think drives that, Ms. Carmen?
Well, the opposition knows from the beginning that their opposition are lies.
Yes.
Okay? So that naturally is going to bring the discouragement.
Yeah.
To those who are weak.
Yes. That's right. Power has everything to do with who you can influence. Right? And so if you can influence the masses, then you have power. Because you can have the popular opinion. You can have the popular direction. You can have the mind that everyone already agrees with. You know, so much of what we deal with on almost every level of life is finding people who agree with us. You know, you see it a lot in the religious world. You do. I mean, you'll see, I'm looking for a church that believes what I believe. Well, does that make you God then? If you're looking for the church that believes what you already believe, that you've already got it figured out, you're trying to find the church that does what you think is right? Or do we inform ourselves with the Bible and find the church that's doing that? See, that's the difference. When it's subjective and negative, these are the kind of problems we get in. And so when you've got influence over the masses, you can basically get done what you want to get done because everyone already agrees with you. In the business realm, we often call that an echo chamber, where everyone already agrees with me. And you do see it in the religious world too, that it becomes very easy to preach to a room full of people that already believe what I believe and not challenge your thoughts, not push your thinking maybe to go deeper, or maybe in some cases even go outside the box if that's what it requires. But the point is that opposition arises for influence, right? If I can make what you're doing look like it's not worth doing to other people, then you'll eventually stop and I'll get my way. And that's what we're seeing here by and large. Now, we see right away in chapter 4, the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the people of exile were building the temple to Yahweh, the God of Israel. Verse 2 says, so they approached Zerubbabel, the heads of the fathers and the households, and said, let us build with you, for we, like you, seek your God. And we have been sacrificing to him since the days of Esarhaddon, the king of Assyria, who brought us up here. But Zerubbabel and Jeshua, the rest of the heads of the fathers and households of Israel, said to them, you have nothing in common with us, building a house to our God. But we ourselves will together build to Yahweh, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us. So the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah. So there's your motivation. You've got adversaries of the people saying, hey, let us help you. We do the same thing. And Zerubbabel's like, no, you don't. You don't do the same thing. You don't worship the same God. You have nothing to do with us. And so because their feelings got hurt, here comes the opposition. Now, what are some positives and negatives of what we just read? What do you think are some positives? Well, think of it like this. What good could possibly come from denying them to help? Okay. The good is, and it seems bad when we read it, the good is that a line was drawn. Because accepting help and compromising with those who don't share your faith, man, that's where it all goes south. That's where most of the division that happens in the religious world happens at that line. Ms. Carmen?
Well, and if the opposition, if they are accepted, they get on the inside, they can do more damage and create more chaos and discouragement.
Absolutely. Look over in I wasn't going to go here, so I didn't really prepare, but it's in, I believe it's 2 Timothy. Yeah, 2 Timothy chapter 3. This is Paul writing to Timothy, warning him about this very thing, about compromising. In 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 1, Paul says, but know this, in the last days difficult times will come. Men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, without gentleness, without the love for good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Sounds like America 2025. Holding a form of godliness, but having denied its power. Hold on to that thought. Holding a form of godliness, but having denied its power. What does that mean? What does it mean to hold a form of godliness?
They're acting it.
Okay.
It's a ruse.
Yeah, they're doing all the right, they're making all the right moves. Right. Okay. Doing the part they like, even. They're saying the right things. You know, a lot of times you'll see it, you know, in expressions of praise, even, you know. So they're holding a form. Notice Paul doesn't say the form; he says a form. You know, Jesus was pretty exclusive in the Lord's Supper lesson when he says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." He didn't say a way, meaning that there's only one. Notice Paul uses the same phraseology here. Holding a form of godliness, but not the form of godliness. And he says, having denied its power, keep away from such men as these. Why? Well, they're holding a form of godliness. They believe in God. They're holding a form to it. Paul says, keep away from these people. Why? Pow. That's it. Look at what happens here. For among them are those who enter households and take captive weak women weighed down with sins, being led on by various desires, always learning, never able to come to the full knowledge of truth. Just as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses, so do these men oppose the truth. Men of a depraved mind, disqualified to regard the faith. But they will not make further progress, for their folly will be obvious to all, just as theirs was also. But you followed my teaching, conduct, purpose, faith, patience, love, and perseverance. He uses the phraseology here of entering households for weak women, but this is not just relegated to weak women, is it? This is talking about spiritually weak people. Said that these people holding a form of godliness will enter households of weak people, weak spiritual people, and do what? What are they going to do? Influence. Huh? Convince them. Influence them. Change their thinking. And Paul's like, no. I gave you the model. Where did Paul's model come from? Christ himself. Directly from. How did Paul know what to say in 1 Corinthians 11 about the Lord's Supper? He got it directly from the source. So when Paul says, I gave you an example, his example came from the source. And so, why are we avoiding these people who hold a form of godliness? Because they'll influence the weak. Frank?
I'm reminded of Paul's admonition to the Ephesian elders.
Yeah.
And he calls them savage wolves. But they weren't going to look like wolves.
No.
They were going to look like sheep.
Well, he said they come from among yourselves.
And they draw away the disciples after them. That's what they're after.
And you know what I love about that too? You know, we often view Paul as this hardened, just very black and white sort of guy. I think the more you study the epistles, the more you realize that there's a lot more gray in Paul than black and white. But in the areas where the black and white matters, he was absolutely spot on. And I love in that passage how he says, with tears, I warned you day and night with tears, emotionally pleading with these elders, saying this is going to happen. If we don't draw a line somewhere, then it's all blurred. And as Paul says here, among them are those who enter households and take captive weak women. And again, it's not in this case it was women, but the principle is that it's weak people, spiritually weak people can be influenced. And so back here in Ezra, when these adversaries, as Ezra calls them, the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the people were building a temple, they said, hey, let us help you. We hold a form of godliness too. He says, no, you don't. We got it. We'd rather do it ourselves. We'd rather not have your help and not have the people led astray. And so when you first read that, you're thinking, man, that's kind of harsh, dude, accept the help. But you see the reason why.
Paul was pretty clear when he told Timothy, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness.
That's right.
You better draw the line.
Draw the line. Not just draw it, hold it. That's probably the harder thing to do, isn't it? I mean, listen, we can draw lines. You know, a real popular phrase in the religious world right now is that Jesus didn't draw lines. He drew circles. You ever heard that? Jesus didn't draw lines, he drew circles. What does that mean when he says, I am the way? There's no circle around that. There's a line. I'm the way. I'm over here. I'm the way. I'm the truth. I'm the life. Nobody comes to the Father except across this line, not in my circle. Don.
Truth is objective. Truth is exclusionary. Otherwise, it's not true.
That's right. It has to be, right? I mean, if, like I said this morning, if you have a truth and I have a truth and Ed has a truth and Rest has a truth, if we all have a truth, which one do we follow? Which one do we hold to? Which one becomes the standard? If I am my own standard, then I do what I think is right. You know, and that spins out of control quick, Miss Carmen.
Well, the Bible is the best commentary on the Bible.
Man, that'll preach. The Bible is the best commentary on the Bible. Absolutely. Frank?
The world says, follow your heart, follow what feels good, follow whatever. And Jesus says, follow me.
That's right. Yeah, Jeremiah said that was a bad idea, didn't he? The heart is deceitful above all things. Who can understand it? Why would you follow that? Ms. Carmen?
Well, you said a very critical thing a moment ago. It sounds like America. You know, there's senatorial after this committee, that committee, that has someone on stage to do exactly what we're reading here in Ezra.
Right.
So what we need to do, well, thank the good Lord that we have the technology, because when they say, but you said, we can go back and see the truth of what the man said or the woman said.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny. I mean, obviously, any man who's taught a class or preached a sermon or a Lord's Supper talk or even given an invitation, you know, there's absolutely a pressure to make sure that what I say is correct. And that I'm not too full of my own opinions, that I'm more full of Scripture, because I know that that's right. I know that this is right, and I can leave my opinions out of it, and I'm safe, right? But, you know, sometimes in the heat of the moment, when you're presenting something and, you know, your passion is kindled and you're getting into it, sometimes you might say something you didn't mean to say. And other times, I said exactly what I meant to say, and it wasn't heard correctly. There's always what I say, what I think I say, and what you heard me say. And sometimes those things don't line up, and so you're absolutely right. It's good to be able to go back and say, well, I looked at that, and you were right, I did say that. And correct it. Or sometimes you can go back and say, nope, this is what I said, you didn't hear what I said. You know, and so you're exactly right. We live in a time where we can go back and verify. It's so good. I'm glad we get to do that. You know, and so I think the key verses of this whole chapter in verse 2 and verse 4, let us build with you, for we seek God. And then verse 4, they discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid. Cause and effect. Right? They rejected their help, and so they mounted opposition towards them. So how should we respond? This is where we left off last week. How do we respond when God's work is slowed or stopped? What do we do?
What do we do, or what should we do?
Both.
Well, we have to have courage, Keith.
Yeah.
Confront when we see error, especially the blatant error.
Yeah.
More courage, because if we don't exercise the courage, then we become weaker and weaker.
Absolutely. You know, that was one of the hardest things during the whole pandemic was, you know, that we're seeking to still obey God, but the government's telling us not to gather. What do we do? You know, and fortunately we found a way I think that's what we have to recognize, that the people of faith will always find a way. But it's here in this case, the work stopped. And did it stop just for a week? In Ezra chapter 4, if you read, the work stopped for years. The work stopped for a long time. And so, hopefully that's not the case in our lifetime. Frank?
Maybe even more basic is realizing what's happening, realizing things have stopped, things have slowed down, things are not right, we need to do something different.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think about the Laodiceans, they didn't realize what was going on. They were just sitting there all fat, dumb, and happy, thinking everything was good. And Jesus says, nope, it's not. And we kind of have to, sometimes we have to stop and evaluate, take a look and say, are things going good, or is something happening that shouldn't be happening?
Yeah. That's a good point. Ms. Carmen?
Well, I think it's great that you mentioned 2 Timothy chapter 3, because my version said, leave captive silly women laden with sins. Now, that silly means without reason.
Yeah.
They don't have the impetus, the mental capacities to really reason, well, is this truth or is it error?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just really core reasoning that you've got to consider what's being said, and is it true? Your critical question that you're asking us to
Is it
consider
true?
today.
Is it true? And so, Discernment. How does one acquire discernment?
Well,
Asking God, right? Asking God for wisdom. But then if I have wisdom, what do I have to do with it?
you-
Exercise it, right? And the thing is I won't ever gain wisdom if I don't ask for it. I won't ever learn how to apply it if I don't study the source. And I won't have it, Ms. Carmen.
Well, and it has to start when those children are 2 and 3 and 4. You have to ask them the question, now, why is mother going to spank you? What did you do?
Mm-hmm.
But what did I say?
Yeah.
You know, they'll say what you said, but if not, you've got to direct them, but what did mother or father say?
That's right.
And you did not do it, is that correct?
Yeah, they have to know why they're getting punished.
So it starts in childhood, that discernment. That's
Yeah.
a great question.
Well, and I think what happens over time like that, I mean, we see it in kids, right? They learn.
True.
They eventually learn, if I do this, then this will happen. And they don't learn that just because they get punished without an explanation. When you're training up a child, you give them the tools. And I think that's critical, is that we have the tools to exercise discernment.
Well, but there's so much time out given.
What does that do?
Well, what does it do? They're going to go and think just like they have thought.
Nothing changes.
Nothing changes.
You go over there and think about what you did, and they will for about 3 seconds. And then they're going to think about what's for lunch. What's Spider-Man doing? What's going on at this place? I wish I was at the playground. Is it cold outside? I mean, the thoughts just go, and time out does nothing effectively. There has to be cause and effect.
Well, but the Bible clearly says that a child left to himself will become the shame of his mother.
You know what? And you don't have to look very far to see that. We live in a society full of it, don't we? I see every day, people having cell phone cameras. I remember when phones just called people. Remember that? Whenever phones, I had a cell phone that just called people. Did y'all have that? They don't do that anymore. They still do, but now everyone's a news reporter, right? Everyone's an investigative reporter catching the action as it's happening. filming something that's horrible and doing nothing to intervene. But they're getting the video because they're going to get likes. That's that narcissism. But here's the thing. You see it more and more and more. People are just out of control, man. Adults jumping over the counter at McDonald's to assault the person behind the counter because they didn't get their order right, or because they took too long, or because they just don't want to pay, and because they know there's no consequences. And this kind of thing is celebrated because what's going to happen to that video? It's going to go viral. Now you're a celebrity for misbehaving. You're rewarded for your bad behavior. It makes no sense. But this is how it happens, right? This is how it happens. And I could go on about removing the father from the home and all these other things that contribute to that. But the point is, it happens. And so back to the question, how should we respond when God's work is slowed or stopped? We don't slow or stop. We don't slow or stop. That's what happens here in chapter 4. And there's that word again. How do we discern whether opposition is simply resistance from the enemy or God's way of testing our faith? That's one of those things we wrestle with, man. We wrestle with knowing, okay, what's the message I'm getting here? If I'm receiving opposition, is it simply resistance that Satan is throwing things in my way? Or is God testing me? And I think the answer to both of those is yes. Flip over to James chapter 1. James chapter 1, there's a couple things that we have to know right off the bat. James says, "Consider it all joy when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith brings about perseverance. And let perseverance have its perfect work or complete work, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." And here's another thing. "But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives all generously, without reproach, and it'll be given to him. But he must ask in faith, doubting nothing. For the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That the man ought not to expect what he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. But the brother of humble circumstances is to boast in his high position." Now jump down to verse 12. "Blessed is a man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved, he'll receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him." So if you just stop there, James here is telling us that opposition is a good thing because of what it produces in us. Okay, so it's from God, right? Well, read on. "Let no one say when he's tempted, I'm being tempted by God, but God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each one is tempted when he's carried away and enticed by his own lust. When lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and when sin is fully matured, it brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my brothers. Every good thing, every perfect gift is from above. But the Father of lights, whom there's no variation." So what's James saying? Are trials good or not? Yes. Are they from God? Not really. Every good gift comes from above. But everything that we go through can be used for good, can it? That's the point. How do we discern whether the opposition is from the enemy or God's way of testing us? When we say that we're being tested by God, I don't think it's God testing us. But God is absolutely paying attention to the test. When we're receiving opposition, when bad things are happening in your life, look at the book of Job. Who's doing the bad there? Satan is testing Job. Satan is taking all his stuff. Satan is killing all his people. Satan is wreaking all this havoc on his health and his family and all of it, with an end goal of getting him to curse God and die. But God is paying attention. We're not being tested for nothing, but it's not God doing it. And what James is telling us is when that happens, use it. Let it complete your faith, he says. Let it perfect your faith. God doesn't do these things to us. God's not some spoiled child inflicting pain on us because he can. We invited that. Remember, whenever God created the earth, he gives Adam some authority, doesn't he? What does Adam have authority over? Everything on earth. When does Adam lose that authority? When he sinned.
Into the apple.
Yeah. He gave it away. Adam gave away the authority that God gave us to wield on this earth. He gave it to Satan. So now who runs things here? Well, Satan is called the prince of the power of the air. He's called the ruler of this world. And it's not that God's not in charge of it all. God's will still will be done. But what that invitation to Satan gave was the ability for opposition, the ability for testing, and God's paying attention. Yes, ma'am.
But by one man's sin, all become sinners.
That's right.
But also, the good of that is by one man's death, i.e. the ransom, we have life.
All can be reconciled.
It's always a choice.
Always. I think that's really what it's about, isn't it? It's, and that, like I said this morning, it's what gives it meaning, right? If I live a life where I only get my way, where's the meaning in that? If I could be immortal, does life have any meaning anymore? If I could just live, to jump off a ledge here, anytime you see like a movie or a book or a story where a vampire is the main character, are they happy? They can live forever. Wouldn't they be happy? All they want is their life to end. Because it doesn't have any meaning anymore. If I could get everything I want, life means nothing. Opposition is a tool of Satan. But all things work to the glory of God. Right? For those who love him. It's in how we use it. We can either use the opposition or we can let it use us. That's the choice. Frank?
One of the Proverbs says, iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
I mean, if you run a knife through butter all the time, it's never going to get sharp.
No.
It's never going to be useful.
It doesn't even have to be sharp, does it?
If Alabama only plays Louisiana Monroe, they're never going to get better. They're just going to think they're doing okay.
Some would argue that that's how their schedule always is. They never really pay anybody real.
I mean, Peter talks about that we go through the crucible of fire so that we become purified.
Yeah,
So that we become precious gold.
that's right.
No trials, no fire, no purity. I mean, and you don't have to go looking for trouble. You don't have to go looking for trials, man. Just hang on.
Wake up. Wake up. Something's waiting on you. I watched this thing on TV. It was a show about these guys that make swords, and they have all these. It's like they make the sword and then they run through this thing chopping stuff to see how strong. Anyway, it's kind of nerding out, but it's cool watching them sharpen it because they had this one frame where they zoom up really up close on the blade, and they do it in slow motion as the blade's being drug across the stone. You see pieces of the blade flying in the air. Right, to sharpen something means you're tearing away the stuff that's no longer useful, the stuff that's no longer good. I love that proverb, that iron sharpens iron, because what it means is that I'm going to rub up against something that's sure, that's true, and it's going to tear away the bad, the useless. And ultimately, it's going to hone me for purpose, right? To have more purpose. Yes, ma'am.
Well, and I'm thinking about your comments there, and it reminds me of Jesus and the 40 days.
Yeah,
Satan left him for a while. You know what I'm
for a while.
And his tool that sharpened that temptation was the Word of God.
The Word of God. Man, I don't know if we could emphasize that enough. The Word of God is, it has to be the center of our Christian walk. I mean, yeah, having a strong faith is absolutely important, but where does that come from? From knowing the Word. I want to have a stronger relationship with God. Where does that come from? Knowing the Word. You know, I mean, every aspect of it comes from knowing this. And the thing is you'll never know it all. Every time you study it, there's something new. There's something that you didn't unlock before that you're able to unlock now. And it's like it builds. I don't know, I can't describe it, but that's what it does. The Word of God builds constantly in your mind and in your soul. So they stopped working for a while. And then, as the chapter comes to a close, we get into chapter 5. That's how it ends. Verse 24 says, "Then the work on the house of God in Jerusalem stopped, and it was stopped until the second year of the reign of Darius, the king of Persia." So picking up then in chapter 5, let's read here 17 verses. I think we got about 10 minutes left. We'll get into some of this, but chapter 5. So the work stopped until Darius, king of Persia, and the prophets Haggai and the prophet Zechariah, the son of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews that were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of God of Israel, who was over them. Then Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, arose and began to rebuild the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. And the prophets of God were with them, supporting them. At that time, Tadonai, the governor in the province beyond the river of Shethar-Bozenai, and their colleagues came to them and spoke to them, saying thus, "Who issued you a decree to rebuild this house and complete this structure?" Then we told them accordingly what the names of the men were who were rebuilding this building. But the eye of their God was on the elders of the Jews, and they didn't stop them until a report could come out or could come to Darius, and then a document to be returned concerning this. This is the copy of the letter which Tadonai, the governor of the province beyond the river, Shethar-Bozenai, and his colleagues and the officials who were beyond the river sent to Darius the king. They sent word to him, which was written thus: "To Darius the king, all peace. Let it be known to the king that we have gone to the province of Judah, to the house of the great God, and it is being built with huge stones, and timbers being put within the walls. And that work is going on with all diligence and is succeeding in their hands. And then we asked those elders who said to them thus, Who issued you the decree to rebuild this house and to complete the structure? We also asked them their names in order to make known to you that we might write down the names of the men who were at their head. Thus they responded with the word to us, saying, We are the servants of the God of heaven and earth. And we were building this house that was built many years ago, which a great king of Israel built and completed. But because our fathers had provoked the God of heaven to wrath, he gave them to the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this house and took away people into exile into Babylon. However, in the first year of Cyrus the king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild this house of God. Also, the gold and silver utensils in the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, brought out to them to the temple of Babylon, where King Cyrus took out those from the temple of Babylon, and were given to one whose name was Sheshbazzar, who had become an appointed governor. And he said to him, Take these articles and go and deposit them in the temple in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be rebuilt in its place. Then that Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundations of the house of God in Jerusalem. Until then, and is being rebuilt and is not yet finished. So now it seems good to the king, so now if it seems good to the king, let a search be made known in the king's treasure house, which there is in Babylon, if that be a decree that was issued by King Cyrus to rebuild the house of God in Jerusalem. And let the king send us his will concerning this matter. So basically we just have a recounting of a letter that's written to the king. And I think the key verses here are verses 1 and 2. Haggai and Zechariah prophesied to the Jews. And then Zerubbabel arose and began to build. What do you have there? You have cause and effect. You have the word of God spoken, the word of God being carried out. Man, if there's not a lesson to that, I don't know what there is. It's funny, though, when you go to Haggai and read Haggai chapter 1. I've mentioned this before. But, where is it? There it is. In Haggai chapter 1, pages stick together. Okay. In Haggai chapter 1, it says, in the second year of Darius the king, so we know we're talking about the same time frame here, right? Yahweh came to the hand of Haggai, the prophet of Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah. So we're right in line here, the same time period. Thus says the Yahweh of hosts, the people says, the time has not come, even the time of the house of Yahweh to be rebuilt. And then the word of Yahweh came by the hand of Haggai the prophet, saying, is it time for you yourselves to live in your paneled houses, while this house lies in waste? So now, thus says Yahweh of hosts, set your hearts to consider your ways. You have sown much, but bring in little. You eat, but there's not enough to be satisfied. You drink, there's not enough to become drunk. You put on clothing, but no one is warm enough. And he who earns wages and put into the bag with holes. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, set your heart to consider your ways. Go up to the mountains and bring wood and rebuild the house of God, that I may be pleased with it and be glorified. You look for much, but behold, it comes to little. You bring it home, and I will blow it away. Why? Because my house lies in waste, while each of you runs in your own house. Man, so that's actually what was said. You know, Ezra just says, God came and spoke. But that's what he said. You see the difference the details make? Ezra just says, God came and spoke to Haggai, and Haggai told us to rebuild the house. But reading Haggai and putting that with it, then these are the details. That was a pretty stern warning. Twice he says, consider your ways. If God's telling you to consider your ways, what do you think you should do? Consider your ways. Look at yourself. And he lines out, he goes, look, man, you guys are living large. You got everything you want, it's not enough, but you're living in your nice houses, but my house is in ruins. Go build my house.
And there's a little nuance in there.
Yeah?
It's not that God objected to them building a house,
Yeah, he gave him time to do it, didn't he? Yeah.
but they were dolling it up. They were paneling it. They were
Oh, yeah.
doing fancy stuff that was unnecessary.
Well, they had all the time in the world for their stuff.
Plenty of time.
No time for God. Busy is the new lazy. But we're busy doing all this stuff. I would really love to come and work on your house, God, but I got all the stuff I got going on. I'd love to help you, but I'm too busy. That's the new lazy. Instead of just saying, I don't want to work at the house of the Lord. You try to cover it up with, well, I'm just too busy. And God calls it out. Consider your ways, he says. So then that puts what we just read in Ezra 5 in a little bit more perspective, doesn't it? And so, you know, the first question I had was, why did the prophet's encouragement matter so much? Well, when you read what was actually said in Haggai chapter 1, you understand why it matters. This is not them just saying, hey, you guys, it's time to rebuild. They're getting called out. That this should have been started a while ago. God gave you time to rebuild your houses, replant your crops, to do all the things that you need to do to live. But now you're not just living in your house. You're, like Russ said, you're building your own temple. You're putting these things in front of God. And I'm out of time. So next Sunday, no review of chapter 4. We'll jump right in here in chapter 5 and get through the rest of this chapter, looking at some of these things that are going on here. And I'm going to have a study guide Wednesday night here for everybody to pick up and take with you, so we can jump in Sunday on the discussion. Thanks, y'all.